For more than half a century, one nervous deputy with a trembling voice made America laugh. But have you ever wondered what it cost him to keep that smile in place? What happens when the man who brings joy to millions goes home carrying fears he can't silence? This is the deeper story of Don Knotts, a beloved television legend whose private struggles shaped his comedy, strained his marriages, and followed him to the very end. The boy behind the badge. To millions, Don Knotts will always be Deputy Barney Fife from the Andy Griffith Show, the wide-eyed, jittery lawman who turned anxiety into art. He won 5 Emmy Awards for that role, an extraordinary achievement that cemented his place in television history. But behind the badge was a boy shaped by fear, uncertainty, and a constant search for safety. Long before Mayberry, there was Morgantown, West Virginia. Born Jesse Donald Knotts on July 21, 1924, he grew up during the Great Depression in a household marked not only by poverty but by instability. His father struggled with severe mental illness and alcoholism. Home was not always safe. It was unpredictable, tense, and often frightening. For a sensitive young boy, that kind of environment leaves a permanent imprint. Have you ever known someone who grew up walking on eggshells, never sure what mood might greet them at the door? That constant alertness doesn't simply disappear with adulthood. In Don's case, it became part of his nervous system, shaping how he saw the world and himself. His father died when Don was 13. The chaos ended, but the anxiety remained, settling quietly into the corners of his mind. His mother, Elsie, became the steady force in his life. She worked tirelessly to support her 4 sons, taking in boarders and sewing to make ends meet. From her, Don learned resilience and discipline. From his circumstances, he learned something else. Humor could diffuse fear. As a shy, undersized child who was often bullied, he found refuge in movies and in ventriloquism. Performing allowed him to hide behind a character. If people were laughing, they weren't judging. And if they were laughing, perhaps the world felt safer. Was comedy, for him, a shield rather than a spotlight? Did every joke carry a quiet plea for acceptance? Even as a child, he began to understand something profound. Laughter could transform vulnerability into strength. War, discovery, and direction. During World War II, Don was drafted into the U.S. Army. Assigned to the Special Services branch, he entertained troops with comedy and ventriloquism. It was not glamorous work, but it was meaningful. Imagine standing before soldiers far from home, men who didn't know if they'd survive the week, and making them laugh. What does it mean to offer humor in the shadow of fear? What does it teach a performer about the power of connection? In those moments, Don realized something life-changing. Laughter had value beyond entertainment. It could steady people in chaos. It could momentarily quiet fear, even his own. After the war, he completed his education at West Virginia University and moved to New York to chase a dream. The climb was slow and uncertain. Radio jobs, stage work, small television appearances, endless auditions. New York was a city of ambition, but also of rejection. How many times did he question himself? How often did his anxiety whisper that he wasn't good enough? His breakthrough came when he appeared regularly on The Steve Allen Show. Playing a nervous, mumbling character opposite the confident host, he became a national sensation. Audiences responded instantly to his jittery charm. The persona felt authentic, because it was. Among those watching was Andy Griffith. When Griffith launched his own sitcom, he insisted a role be created specifically for Knotts. The result was television history. Creating Barney Fife, Anxiety as Art. From 1960 to 1965, Knotts transformed the fictional town of Mayberry into a stage for one of television's most iconic characters, Barney Fife. Barney was insecure, excitable, and deeply eager to prove himself. He carried a single bullet in his pocket because he couldn't be trusted with a loaded gun. He panicked easily, boasted loudly, and failed spectacularly, yet audiences loved him. Why? Perhaps because he reflected something deeply human. Who hasn't felt inadequate? Who hasn't tried to hide fear behind confidence? Knotts' physical comedy was precise and brilliant. Trembling hands, darting eyes, explosive reactions. His timing was unmatched. He won 5 consecutive Emmy Awards, an unprecedented achievement. Yet here lies a haunting question. When an actor draws so deeply from personal anxiety to create a character, where does the performance end and the pain begin? For Knotts, the line was often blurred. The nervous energy audiences adored was not merely performance, it was lived experience. Marriage, fame, and distance. Before fame, there was Catherine Metz, his college sweetheart. They married in 1947. She believed in him when few others did, supporting him through lean years in New York filled with uncertainty and sacrifice. They had 2 children, Karen and Thomas. For a time, life felt balanced. There were dreams, struggles, and shared hope. But when the Andy Griffith Show became a massive success, everything changed. Long filming days stretched into exhausting weeks. Public recognition brought pressure. The expectations placed on a rising star were relentless. Catherine, far from her support system, raised their children largely alone while her husband became a national icon. How many marriages have quietly crumbled under the weight of success? How often does achievement demand more than we anticipate? Don brought his anxiety home with him. The man who made America laugh often had little emotional energy left by week's end. The distance between them grew slowly but steadily. In 1964, after 17 years of marriage, they divorced. 2 years later, Catherine died suddenly at just 38 years old. The cause was never publicly detailed. For Don, the loss was devastating. She had been there before the fame, before the awards, before the applause, before the pressure. Her death became one of the quiet sorrows he carried for the rest of his life. Did he ever wonder whether success had cost him something irreplaceable? A second attempt, and familiar struggles. In 1974, he married Laurel Chuckna, a private woman with little interest in Hollywood spotlight. Their relationship promised a fresh beginning, a chance at stability after years of turbulence. Professionally, he found renewed visibility on Three's Company, playing the flamboyant landlord Ralph Furley. With colorful leisure suits and exaggerated confidence, Furley was comedic brilliance, a performance both bold and absurd. A new generation embraced him. Yet behind the scenes, anxiety still ruled his inner world. Chronic worry, hypochondria, fear of illness, panic attacks, long before mental health conversations were widely accepted. He often believed he was seriously ill, seeking constant reassurance. Friends described him as gentle, kind, and deeply sensitive, but perpetually uneasy. Laurel preferred privacy and calm. Don lived with a restless mind that rarely found peace. Their emotional worlds moved at different speeds. In 1983, they divorced quietly. No scandal. No public fights. Just 2 people unable to bridge the distance between inner turmoil and external stability. What happens when love meets a battle that cannot be seen? The hidden weight of laughter. For decades, audiences saw only the humor. They saw the pratfalls, the frantic gestures, the wide-eyed confusion. But comedy, for Knotts, was never merely performance, it was survival. Psychologists often suggest that humor can function as a coping mechanism, a way to manage fear and vulnerability. Was Knotts instinctively practicing this long before science explained it? Was each laugh a small victory over anxiety? Those who worked with him frequently described a contrast. On camera, he radiated energy and precision. Off camera, he could be quiet, introspective, even fragile. The transition between the 2 worlds required immense effort. Imagine the exhaustion of constantly transforming fear into entertainment. What toll does that take over a lifetime? Despite his struggles, he remained deeply dedicated to his craft. He approached comedy with seriousness and discipline, rehearsing endlessly to perfect even the smallest gestures. His performances were not accidental, they were carefully constructed expressions of vulnerability. Friendship and belonging. Throughout his life, friendship provided moments of stability. His relationship with Andy Griffith extended far beyond television. The 2 shared mutual respect and genuine affection. Griffith understood Knotts' insecurities and often reassured him of his talent. Their collaboration demonstrated something powerful. Even the most anxious individuals can flourish when supported by understanding companions. Have you ever experienced the comfort of someone who truly sees you, flaws, fears, and all, and still believes in you? For Knotts, such relationships offered refuge from his restless thoughts. He also maintained a close bond with his children. Though his career demanded time and attention, he cared deeply for them and sought to be present whenever possible. In quieter moments, away from studios and audiences, he was simply a father seeking connection. Later years and enduring anxiety. As he aged, his health became a growing concern, both real and imagined. He continued acting in films, television appearances, and voice work, but his anxiety persisted. He married a third time, to Frances Yarborough, in 2002. Their relationship brought companionship in his later years, offering a sense of peace he had long pursued. Yet the fears never fully disappeared. Even in success, even in recognition, even in love, he wrestled with the same questions that had haunted him since childhood. Was he safe? Was he valued? Would the anxiety ever end? In February 2006, he passed away at the age of 81. For millions, it was the loss of a beloved entertainer. For those who knew his deeper story, it was the end of a lifelong struggle for inner calm. A legacy beyond laughter. Today, Knotts remains one of television's most cherished comedic figures. His performances continue to inspire actors and comedians who study his timing, expressions, and fearless vulnerability. But perhaps his greatest legacy lies beyond laughter. His life reveals the hidden complexity behind public joy. It reminds us that those who make us laugh may carry unseen burdens. It challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about success and happiness. How often do we mistake applause for fulfillment? How often do we assume that public admiration equals inner peace? His story invites compassion, for performers, for loved ones, and for ourselves. The human story behind the icon. At its core, this is not merely the story of a television legend. It is the story of a sensitive child seeking safety in an unpredictable world, a performer transforming fear into art, and a man searching for peace within a restless mind that rarely allowed him to rest. Behind the familiar smile and nervous energy lived a person who understood anxiety not as an abstract concept, but as a constant companion. His life was shaped by the quiet tension between vulnerability and performance, between the private self and the public persona. The anxious deputy who stumbled through Mayberry reflected something deeply universal, the fragile courage of simply being human. Through Barney Fife and countless other characters, Don Knotts allowed audiences to laugh at their own insecurities. He invited them to see vulnerability not as weakness, but as a bridge connecting one heart to another. Perhaps that is why his work continues to resonate. It speaks to the shared experience of fear and hope, failure and resilience, uncertainty and perseverance. His comedy was not built on perfection, but on the recognition that imperfection binds us all. And so the questions remain. What do we hide behind our own performances? What unseen struggles shape the faces we show the world? And what might happen if we met one another with the same empathy we extend to those who make us laugh? Don Knotts gave the world laughter born from vulnerability. Behind every nervous glance and trembling gesture was a lifetime of courage, a quiet battle fought not with weapons, but with humor. And perhaps, in the end, that is what made him unforgettable. The hidden battle. Let's pause here for a moment. How many people from that era openly discussed anxiety disorders? How many men of his generation admitted to fear, uncertainty, or emotional struggle? At a time when vulnerability was often mistaken for weakness, silence became the norm. Don rarely spoke publicly about his inner turmoil. Yet those closest to him understood the depth of his struggle. He lived with persistent worry, often fearing serious illness. Minor physical symptoms could spiral into catastrophic scenarios in his mind. He sought reassurance from doctors repeatedly, searching for certainty in a body and world that felt unpredictable. What does it mean to live with a mind that constantly anticipates disaster? How exhausting must it be to carry such tension day after day? Ironically, the very anxiety that troubled him became the source of his brilliance. His trembling voice, darting eyes, and explosive reactions were not entirely inventions. They were heightened expressions of genuine feeling. He transformed personal distress into performance, turning fear into something others could recognize and laugh at. Comedy became more than a profession. It became a coping mechanism, a refuge, a form of emotional survival. Yet success never erased self-doubt. Even at the height of his fame, he feared being exposed as inadequate. Applause did not silence the inner critic. Awards did not dissolve uncertainty. He worried about being trapped in a single role, forever defined by one character. He questioned his decisions, his direction, and sometimes even his worth. Why does external success so rarely quiet internal fear? Why do the loudest cheers sometimes fail to reach the quietest doubts? These questions lingered throughout his life and shaped many of his choices, especially the one that would become his greatest regret. Leaving Mayberry. In 1965, at the peak of his success, Don Knotts made a decision that would haunt him for years. He left the Andy Griffith Show. He had signed a 5-picture film deal with Universal Studios, believing the show might conclude after its 5th season. The opportunity seemed logical, even necessary, a chance to expand his career and prove his range beyond a single beloved role. For an actor fearful of stagnation, the decision felt like a step toward growth. But life rarely follows expectations. The show continued without him, thriving for several more seasons. The world of Mayberry endured, but his place within it had changed. He later admitted that had he known the series would continue, he might never have left. His films achieved modest success, yet they did not elevate him to the cinematic stature he had imagined. Critics sometimes dismissed him as one-dimensional, overlooking the emotional complexity beneath his comedic style. He felt misunderstood, as though the industry saw only the surface of his talent. Have you ever made a choice that seemed right in the moment, only to look back years later with lingering uncertainty? How often do we act with confidence, unaware of the paths we close behind us? Regret is a heavy companion. For Don, leaving Mayberry became a defining turning point, a decision revisited in memory, reconsidered in quiet moments, never entirely resolved. Yet life continued. He worked steadily, appearing in television and film, reconnecting with audiences who still cherished his unique presence. Though the shadow of regret lingered, so did his commitment to his craft. And through it all, one thing remained constant: his enduring friendship with Andy Griffith. Their bond survived professional separation, reminding us that genuine connection can outlast career choices and personal doubts. The search for peace. As the years passed, the relentless pace of fame softened. The urgency of career ambition gradually gave way to reflection. With time came perspective, and with perspective the possibility of peace. After years of personal and professional challenges, he found companionship once more. In 2002, at the age of 78, he married Frances Yarborough. Their relationship was quiet and steady, marked not by spectacle but by devotion. By then, the pressures of constant public attention had diminished. The spotlight no longer demanded the same intensity. What remained was something simpler and perhaps more meaningful: companionship, understanding, and the comfort of shared time. Frances became his partner, caregiver, and emotional anchor in his final years. Their life together reflected a gentler rhythm, one shaped by acceptance rather than ambition. What does it mean to find love later in life? Can peace arrive after decades of inner struggle? For a man who had spent much of his life wrestling with anxiety, this period brought a measure of calm. It did not erase the past, but it offered reassurance in the present. And sometimes, reassurance is enough. The final chapter. Yet even as emotional peace grew, physical challenges emerged. In his late 70s, Don was diagnosed with macular degeneration, a condition that gradually destroys central vision. For a performer whose comedy relied heavily on facial expression and visual nuance, the diagnosis carried a painful irony. The eyes that had communicated so much emotion to audiences were slowly losing their clarity. How does an artist confront the loss of the very abilities that defined their work? What does it mean to face such change after a lifetime of performance? His health continued to decline. He later developed lung cancer, and pneumonia followed. The body that had once animated beloved characters now demanded rest. In February 2006, he was admitted to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. His daughter Karen remained by his side, offering comfort and presence. Andy Griffith, his longtime friend and collaborator, came to say goodbye, a moment reflecting decades of shared history and enduring affection. On February 24, 2006, Don Knotts died at the age of 81 from pulmonary complications related to pneumonia and lung cancer. He was laid to rest at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, among many figures whose work shaped entertainment history. Yet his legacy was not confined to a resting place. It lived on in the laughter he inspired and the emotional honesty he shared with audiences. At the time of his passing, His financial estate was modest by modern celebrity standards. But wealth can be measured in many ways. His true legacy was far greater. Decades of joy etched into cultural memory, countless moments of laughter shared across generations. What do we learn from his story? When you look back on your own life, what matters more, perfection or perseverance? Achievement or authenticity? Success or connection? Don Knotts never fully conquered his anxiety. He never entirely silenced self-doubt. He made choices he later questioned and carried regrets he could not erase. And yet, he gave joy to millions. Perhaps that is the quiet lesson in his story. We do not need to be fearless to be extraordinary. We do not need certainty to create meaning. We do not need to eliminate doubt to leave a lasting impact. His life reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to continue despite it. His performances reveal that vulnerability can become strength when shared honestly. His struggles show that even those who bring laughter to others carry unseen burdens of their own. Behind the trembling deputy stood a fragile, deeply human individual who transformed personal fear into collective laughter. In doing so, he helped audiences confront their own insecurities with compassion and humor. What if we embraced our vulnerabilities rather than hiding them? What if we recognized the quiet battles others fight each day? What if empathy, rather than judgment, shaped our understanding of one another? If his life teaches us anything, it is this: sometimes the people who make us laugh the hardest are those who have learned to live with the most private struggles. Their humor is not an escape from pain, but a response to it, a testament to resilience. And maybe that makes their gift even more remarkable. For in the end, Don Knotts did more than entertain. He revealed the beauty of imperfection, the strength of vulnerability, and the enduring power of laughter born from the depths of the human experience. His story invites us not only to remember him, but to reflect on ourselves, our fears, our hopes, and the courage required simply to be human.